Good morning. Good morning to all the participants and a warm welcome to our resource person, Dr. Bindu Ranjan Chakma sir, Associate Professor from Maharaja Bir Bikram University. A warm welcome to all the participants in the second session of this 5-day long FDP cum National Workshop on Strategies for Assimilation of IKS with Modern Education System. Today, we have with us resource person Dr. Binduranjan Chakma sir. Sir will be given or sharing his insights on the topic Quoteless Public Administration Thoughts in Specific India and Global GDP Ancient India. Sir has done extensive research work on political theory, international relations, administrative thought, environment politics, and administration. We believe his insight will imbue our participants to carry out intensive and extensive research work. So today I would like to request Dr. Bindu Ranjan Chakma sir, our esteemed resource person, to deliver his address on the topic Portalless Public Administration Thoughts in Specific India and Global GDP Ancient India. Sir, a warm welcome to you, and I would like to request you to take over the session. Thank you.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible, sir. Audible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. First, I would like good morning to all of you. Good morning to all of you. First, I would like to express my gratitude to the Central Sanskrit University Akolombo campus, Lembusura, Agartala, for inviting me to deliver a lecture on Kotilos administrative thought and how it continues to be relevant in the that is the administrative system as well as in world politics today. So as I have been introduced, actually my specialization is actually rather than I would say is more on international relations than public administration. But however, after having gone through the different administrative thoughts, I found the subject very, very interesting. And since the time I have started specializing on administrative thought as well. So I will try my best. And I hope that since all of you are in the higher education systems, you have already been introduced with the Cotillo's administrative thought, either during the post-graduation or the graduation. So all of you, to a certain extent, are familiar with the Cotillo's administrative thought as well. Okay, so when we talk about public administrations, basically the field public administration became popular after the publication of the study of administration that was published in 1887 and was written by the father of public administration, whom we know as Woodrow Wilson, the former president of the United States of America. So since the publication of the study of administration, that the field of public administration actually became very, very popular. And since the time, if you just look at that, the administrative thoughts or the ideas we see actually have mostly been contributed by the Americans or the European, the peoples. But actually, apart from the Europeans as well as the Americans, if we just look at, there were some, the also administrative, the thinkers from, the eastern, the part of the world, including India, whose contributions have not been actually recognized or were not given due importance. In other words, that we either, they heard very little about their contributions to the development or the progression of the administrative thought. And one of such important personality is none other than Cotillo. And he is undoubtedly the most important distinguished Indians in the field of administrative and the management thought. So we'll definitely be taking care of Kotilo's contribution to the field of the administrative and the management thought. But before we deal with the Cotillo's administrative and the management thought, let me just, try to introduce you with the basic, the administrative approaches or the theories based on which actually that the disciplines of public administration, has so far been, developed. So as I say, Woodrow Wilson is generally recognized as the father of public administration with that is the publication of the study of administration in 1887. But that does not mean that there was no any, the initiative to study administrations. But what Woodrow Wilson was actually talking about was that to study actually any discipline, you need to have some, the systematic, the approaches or a system based on which you can study the subject in a systematic manner. So that Woodrow Wilson was basically talking about that what do you need? That before 1887, the public administration as a subject was completely, the subordinate to the field of politics. In other words, the politicians, they were in one way the master of politics. At the same time, also they were taking care of the administrative, the parts. So therefore, that politics used to be given topmost importance, and administration was used to be considered as a subordinate part of politics. In other words, that politics and administrations were basically taken care by the politicians. So therefore, Woodrow Wilson, that he was very much, the opposed to that idea of, the controlling, the administration by the politicians, and he was very much, the unhappy with that the spoil system that actually used to be a part of the American public administrative systems during that time. So as a result, one of his important contribution was the concept of separation of politics from administration, which also we popularly know as the concept of the politics and administration actually dichotomy. So apart from that, also that Woodrow Wilson actually, they talk about that is the having an independent, the civil service systems, and thereafter, if we see that if we try to classify the administrative, the ideas or the thoughts, so simply we can, that is they classify them into 3 or 4 important, that is the approaches. One is the classical approach. The second one we can say as the human relations or the new human relations approach. And the other one that we can say that is, which are to some extent are different from the classical or the human relation or the new human relation approach. And that approach we can say as the concept of the new public administration. And very recently, a new, the administrative approach that was, we cannot say recently, but basically, the after the end of this century, that is, it became basically popular from 2020, beginning of the 21st century, and that approach is known as the new public service approach. So many things actually that we find, like, under the classical approach, we find the contribution of Frederick Winslow Taylor, we find the contribution of the Max Weber also, we find the contribution of Henry Ardwick, Henry Powell, Luther Gulick, and all. And thereafter, the human relation approach, what I am telling all these things, whether all these, that is the administrative ideas and the thought were reflected in the Cotillo's, the administrative and the management thought or not. So that will actually take care of that later on. So that means, that in the classical, the administrative system, if we just look at the classical administrative system is very much, decentralized. Is very much centralized in nature. So that means, it believe in a, the top-down approach. And as a result, that is the most of the decision were to be taken care by the, that is the top level of the administration. But in these systems, one of the important thing was that was, the very much formal. I mean, the administration used to be carried on only on the basis of the formal rules and regulations. So thereafter, therefore, that Elton Mowa, a noted, the American, also an American administrative thinker who, that is had an extensive, the research in the Western, that is the electronics company Chicago for a long time, and that, his research findings ultimately led to the development of the human relations school, opposing the basic premises of the classical administrative thought, particularly for ignoring the importance of the informal aspects of human relations. In other words, that if there is no equal relationship between the management and the workers working at different levels of the organizations, so that means that the workers or the employees who work at a different level of the organizations, they do not get the motivated. So therefore we require to have a very, very friendly and cordial relations, giving importance on the non-formal aspects, that is love, respect. All these things are also due to be taken care by the administrative systems, so that the employees or the workers working at different level of the organizations, they also they feel that yes, they are also actually respected and honored by their leaders or by the top leadership of the organizations. So thereafter, the new human relation in schools. New human relation in schools also, that if we just look at one of the important, the contributor in this field was Chester Barnett. Chester Barnett, actually, he developed the concept of organization as a cooperative social systems. In other words, that what should be the functions of the executives? Should it be the functions of the executive to centralize, the power or to take care of everything? No. That's Chester Barnett, while talking about the organization as the cooperative social systems, he said that organizations actually, that the human beings, they feel the importance of forming organizations because of the collective necessity, not for the necessity of one or two individuals, but for the collective necessity. Because we, as a human beings, we have some the inadequacies or limitations, and it is because of some inadequacies or limitations that we cannot fulfill all our needs or all our requirements. So therefore, that ultimately necessitates us to cooperate among ourselves, and that lead the formation of organizations. So therefore, when someone becomes the leaders, it becomes his responsibility not only to take care of the that is the interest, collective interest of the organizations, but also the collective interest of all the members of the organizations. And that ultimately led to the development of the concept of the accepted theory of authority, quite different to the traditional concept of authority. So what does it mean? That it means that when I'm in the chair, by virtue of my power, I have the power, I have the authority to issue orders. But the thing is that I, as an authority, I have to look at whether the orders which I issued to my subordinates, they are actually complying with it or not. If they do not comply, so that means my power or my authority is actually meaningless. So therefore, authority needs to become acceptable. And authority needs to, in order to become acceptable, ultimately what will happen, the functions of the executive should be like this, that he should not only take care of the interest, collective interest of the organization, but also at the same time to care of the interests of each and every member of the organization in such a way so that whenever I, as an authority, issue any order, that becomes, the acceptable, that the deals with the collective interest of the organization, and that does not go with the against the interest of any of the members of the organization, thereby creating a zone which is called the zone of indifference. And another important persons, it is not possible to highlight the contribution of each and everybody, but there is another person with whom we can correlate with the Cotillo also, and that is the that is McCluskey, McCluskey, that is McGregor concept of Douglas McGregor concept of theory of X and Y. So this is also one of the important, the theory that deals with the concept of motivations. Theory of X, it says that the human beings, by virtue of their nature, they are very much lazy. They are not willing to take, the responsibilities unless they are coerced or they are being forced. But on the other hand, he also, talked about that in the theory of Y, that is, human beings, they are not lazy. They are ready to take responsibility. But why do they not take responsibility? It is because they prefer autonomy. So until and unless They are not given autonomy. They are not given the responsibility to perform or to take care of their responsibility in an autonomous manner. So ultimately, they become, the discouraged. And while comparing the importance between these two theories, ultimately he prefer theory of Y than theory of X. Now, let me also, talk about, as I have already told you, about the new public administrations and the new public service approach. Then I will come to Cotillo's contribution towards the development of administrative and the management thought. Whether that we can find the Cotillo's, the administrative and the management thought in the presence, the administrative and the management theoretical literature or not. So let me just, talk about that is the concept of the new public administration. So the concept of the new public administration was an outcome of the first Menubruk conference, where Dewart Waldo and some of his, the colleagues of the associates, they contributed a lot towards the development of this new concept, that is the new public administrations, telling that the administration, whenever the administration, that is takes any the works, or that is any responsibility, that means that they must have not only relevance, then they must not only have relevance, but also they must be very much the goal and the value associated. In other words, that without values, administrative ideas and the thoughts and the administrative activities cannot be meaningful and relevant. So therefore, that in order to have the administrative decision relevant, it must be the goal oriented. It must be that is value laden. In other words, that it must have value. It must have the value associated. And the second important aspect of this is that he also talked about the client oriented. Client oriented. The client oriented means that it must not only take the interest of only a section of the society, but also it must take care of the interest of each and every section of the society. In other words, that is talking about that particularly those who are in the administrations, they have some discretionary powers, and these discretionary powers, the administrator, they must use they must use for the benefits of the downtrodden section of the society. As I talk about the new system that is called the new public service systems, particularly in the 2019, that approach was developed in opposition to the new public management systems. A new public management system, it was an outcome in the 1990s following the development of the concept of the new public management, that is the globalization, the concept of globalization, when globalization was trying to, trying to conceptualize administration in the way that is called the reinventing government. Reinventing government. So, in response to the new public management, therefore, a new approach that is called the new public service approach was actually developed, emphasizing that the the administrator, they must be responsible and responsive to each and every section of the society. But on the other hand, if you just look at the new public management, it was only talking about in terms of privatization, in terms of liberalization, in the name of the reinventing government. So therefore, that is bringing back once again the importance of, that is, we can say, that is the administrative system which prevailed during the period of colonialism or during the period of imperialism, giving importance to only that is a section of the society. So now let me come back to the Cotillo, which is the main, the part of my discussion in today's, the lecture. So as I have already told you that Cotillo's, one of that is his concepts of administrative and management thoughts are basically reflected in Arthashastra. So it is a combination of 15 actually books. So Arthashastra is an outcome of a combination of the ideas which have been reflected in 15 books. But this Arthashastra remains neglected or remain undiscovered until 1904, and when it was published in 1909. So before that, you just see, it was a 315th century BC. So after how many, the years or the centuries that Kotillo's Arthasastra or his, the contribution to the administrative and the management thought remain neglected. They were neglected, and whereas we're giving more importance on the contribution of the European and the American scholars towards the progression and the development of the administrative and the management thought. So here lies the importance of rediscovering the contribution of the Indian knowledge systems with reference to Kotillo, how Kotillo, as an administrative thinkers in the ancient time, contributed to the administrative and the management thought, and how they are reflected in the modern or in today's administrative and the administrative and the management theoretical literature. So here comes the importance of Arthasastra or the importance of studying Kotillo. So out of these, the 15 books, if we just look at particularly, the book number 1, 2, 5, and 6, these books actually they deal with the patterns of public administrations. But Arthasastra as a book, or sorry, Arthasastra, as a literature, it basically, it deals not only with the political, but also social and economic management of the states. So therefore, in the modern, the administrative systems, whatever actually we find today, these are all actually were reflected in the Kotillos, the Arthasastra. So taking care of the Kotillos Arthasastra, it's not so actually easy, and it takes, the lot of time also, and it is not possible to cover everything with with a single lecture or by a 45 minutes lecture. So therefore, instead of going in details about the various the aspects of the Kotillos Arthasastra, rather I would try to concentrate with two important the concepts. Number one, or two or three important concepts. Number one, that the Kotillos the Saptanga theory, and Kotillos, the mandala theory, and later on the concept of the good governance, whether we find under the Kotillos, the administrative and the management thought or not. So today, if we just look at in the the modern the state systems, what are the basic components that we find in the modern the state systems? The same, the concepts that we actually find under the Kotillos, the Saptanga theory or the 7 components of the states. So let me just, talk about the Saptanga theory or the 7 components of the states. And I hope that when I'll be reading out these, and when I'll be talking about all these things, so that automatically, they will be able to understand what we're actually talking about. Let us now talk about the 7 components of the Kotillos Saptanga theory. He first, they talk about the king, also Swami, the king, Amartya, the ministers, Janapada, the territory, Durga, the fortified capital, Kasa, the treasury, Danda, a coercive power of the state, and the Mitra or the ally. We can say as ally. So when a state is actually, the stands for, whether it's a developing country or a developed country or a least developing country, in every state, actually, we have all these components. The only difference is that when Kotillo was talking about the 7 components of the state system during that time, the modern concept of the nation state that we have today, that was not actually developed. That was not developed. So in other words, today, the way that we find the concept of the sovereign and the independent, the concept of the state, that, the modern concept of the state was actually not developed at the time when Kotillo was actually talking about his Arthasastra or the Saptanga theory of the state. But otherwise, when we talk about the king, so that means in every country, either whether it is a presidential system of government or the republican system of government or an authoritarian system of government, we find there is the head of the state. Say, for example, in our country, India. India is a parliamentary system of government where the president is a tutelar, the head, or the just the by name only he is the head of the country. But in other words, our prime minister is actually the actual head of the country. So Like in Bangladesh also, it is also a parliamentary system of government. In Great Britain, which is also a parliamentary system of government, but it is not a republican. So where the king is the tutelar head, but on the other hand, the prime minister exercises all the powers in the name of the monarch in United Kingdom. But on the other hand, if we just look about United States of America, which is a presidential system of government, so where the president is the head of the state. President is the head of the state. Very recently, the presidential election has been, they held in Russia, where the president is the head of the state. In China, which is a communist country, where the president is the head of the state, and he works under the command or the directions of the Communist Party of China. So therefore, in every country, when we talk about the components of the state, we see there is the head of the state. So when we talk about the omocho, that is the ministers. So in every country that we have ministers. In United States of America, we do not have the concept of the ministers, but basically the president of the United States of America, what he does, he forms the cabinet. He forms the cabinets. They are basically popularly known as the secretaries. Say, for example, the defense secretaries, foreign secretaries. So they works actually, or they perform their works just like the ministers, as we see in our country, where we have the concept of the prime minister, we have the defense minister, and so many the other ministers in our country. Janapada territory. So without this concept of Janapada, a country they can never claim itself as a country. So therefore, this territory is must. Without territory, there cannot be the existence of any country or the state. Durga means the fortified, the capital. So every country is actually having a capital, and that needs, the fortification. At the same time, also, from modern perspective, when it says about the Durga or the fortified, the capital in the modern perspective, it is also actually talking about the importance of, the military power of the country also, because the military power of a country actually helps to maintain that is the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and at the same time also that it also towards the expansionisms or the foreign aggression. So therefore, Durga or the fortification is very much the important. Kasa, it talks about treasury. So every country is actually required to have a treasury. It is actually basically talking about the economics department. So therefore, the Kasa or the treasury is very much important, and it continues to be an important aspect of the modern, the modern component of the modern national state system as well. Dondo, the coercive power of the state. Coercive power of the state. Every country maintains this coercive power of the state. In other words, that if anybody violates the rules of the law, if anybody goes against the country's interest, so the state or the country definitely has the power, the coercive power, to give necessary punishment as per the law of the land, and the highest is the capital punishment or execution. So every country they maintains, but there are some countries which do not believe in capital punishment. So therefore, it is actually they varies from country to country. But when I talk about the coercive power of the state, that does not they relate only with the capital punishment. Mitro, ally is very much the important. So therefore, if we just look at when we particularly talk about the external the relation of the country, so Mitro is very much the important. Let me just give you the example is that India, after its independence till 1971, we can say basically follow the part of non-aligned movement. So in other words, it neither the joined with United States of America's capitalist scheme, or it joined with the Soviet Union, the socialist scheme. But however, because of some important the international events which are threatening to India's security, ultimately United States and India had to consider signing an accord with Soviet Union in 1971, just before the Bangladesh the liberation war. So, and apart from that also, when we talk about the non-aligned movement, so non-aligned movement itself was also an ally, because India tried to bring all the Asians and the African nations within the umbrella of that is the non-aligned movement. In other words, that that we should they become ally, and we should fight together against the color politics, against the international injustices, which were basically meted to the developing world. So therefore, what I would like to say is that when we talk about the 7 components of the state, as were mentioned in this Cotillo's Saptangos theories, they still continue to remain important parts of the modern state system itself. But the only thing is that they are being studied in a different names or in different manners because of the changing situation of the time. The second important, the aspects that, as I said, to deal with, which is, the still, the very much, the relevant, is the 6-pole policy, which is also popularly known as the Cotillo's, the mandala theory, that, that talks about how to, explain and analyze the states, the foreign relations. So when Cotillo was talking about the mandala theory, basically, we find there are 6, the pole policies that how, the state, as far as, its relation with the other state, is concerned, that it will deal with. So let us now try to see what are these, the 6 pole policies. 6 pole policies. The first one is the Sandhi, that is the Treaty of Peace. So every country actually what it prefers, every country actually virtually prefers to have, the peace in writing, although that doesn't happen to take place practically because of some, because of some, or we can say, the clashes of interest among the national states. The secondly is the concept of the vigraha, that is word. And Cotillo, in fact, that he placed very much, the importance on the importance of, the vigraha or the word. If you want to, go for territorial expansions, and if you believe that, your military power is very much superior as compared to the others, so obviously, for territorial, the conquest, you can definitely go for vigraha or the word. Although he talked about 3 different kinds of, the word: open word, secret word, and another word, silent word. So these 3 importance, the kinds of word actually that he talked about. And today we also see that in the modern, the international, the state systems, that we find that there are countries when they find that, their national interests, which are to be met from the international arena, are not negotiable, and they are bound to be, the conflicting. So ultimately, such, the non-negotiating, conflicting national interests finally lead to the outbreak of war. So after the Second World War, also, therefore, we found that there have been, the numerous, the war that were actually fought either at the regional level or, in a particular, the regions. Say, for example, today that we are having 2 important, the war in 2 parts of the world, in the Palestinians, in the, between Israel and the Hamas, in, the Middle East, and at the same time also we're seeing, which is still continuing for the last 2 years, the war between, that is Russia and Ukraine. And at the same time also, we would see that India had, the wars with Pakistan. India, they also had war with China in 1962. In 1962, and also that, that very recently, a think tank in the United States of America has, they published a report that by 2000, the 30, India and China, the way, that the border dispute continues to be, the widening, and continues to be, the non-negotiable, that these 2 countries are expected to have a war by 2030. By 2030, and at the same time also, if we just look at that, India had war with Pakistan in 1947, 48, in 1965, in 1971, and in 1999, the Kargil crisis. So therefore, the war, in the foreign policy of the state, that still continues to be an important component in the foreign policy of some countries. So asana, that is neutrality. Neutrality is also one of the very, very, the important concepts, which is still, they find that many countries, they try to prefer at a time of, the particularly war or the conflict between 2 or more countries. Neutrality means that I will not take any side, so rather I will keep silent. However, as I already mentioned about the concept of non-aligned movement, non-alignment was actually not associated with neutrality, because neutrality actually it continues so long as the war continues. But when you talk about non-aligned movement, it was basically talking about the persuasions of independent foreign policy to have its own voice, even during the time of war and after the war also. Yana, it's also very, very, the important concept that marching towards, presumably, by presuming that there is a threat perceptions. Very recently, the government of India has decided to deploy more 10,000 troops along the line of actual control, that is along the India and China disputed border. Why? Because there is a threat perception. There is a threat perception even after, particularly following the Galwan, the Balis, the conflict, that although there have been several rounds of, the negotiations at the commander levels between the two armed forces, however, that the tension still continues to persist. And the way that the infrastructural development on both sides of the borders have been, going on, that we see that the threat perception, that still, continues. And as a result of that, India has decided to deploy another 10,000 troops along the India and China border, particularly in the, the Ladakh sections of the, the India and China border. Then Samsara, which is known as alliance. So alliance we have already talked about also. So in the foreign policy also, that today that Cotillo actually talk about alliance, that today we also see there, the countries are preparing to have alliance. Say, for example, we see there are several, the organizations at the regional level, whether it is an economic organizations or whether it is a military organizations. Let me just give you the burning examples, that important example, although that was formed during the Cold War period, but that is still continues to remain important, and that is called the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as a military alliance that was basically formed by United States of America during the Cold War period in order to contain the expansions of Soviet Union in the Europe and the North Atlantic, the areas. So the Cold War period was over in 1991 following disintegration of Soviet Union. But why does that, the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization is still, they continues? So at the same time also that we see that, there are several, the regional alliance also or regional organizations. And the two important, the examples which are very, very successful in terms of, in terms of, that is the developments of the regional thought also, we can give the examples of European Union, how European Union started its journey with the steel and the coal community, and finally, from steel and the coal community, it has been converted into European Union with a single European Parliament and European, that is the currency that is called euro. And another, the example that I can suggest is the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which was formed with most of the countries of the Southeast Asia regions. So these concept of the alliance, and at the same time also that India, they became member of different, the regional organizations, like, that is the at the South Asian level also, that is not a much successful organization, which is called SARC. But at the same time also that India, they had, the understandings with United States of America in many, the platforms like, that is the G20. We also give the example of the G77. So these are so many, the examples that we see where some of them, that is the nation state, they prefer to become, the members of such organization in order to have, the alliance. Then the other one is the divide, making in one way peace, and at the end, on the other hand, taking another approach at the other side. Just would like to give you this example that how United States of America actually, that it is in the Cold War period, that it pursues as a policy with China. That Soviet Union and China, they were the communist giants, and initially they were having a very friendly, the relationship. But later on, because of some growing misunderstanding between the two communist giants, how, with the help of the Pakistans, that the United States of America had a reapproachment with the Chinese, the Communist Party. But at the same time, that it maintains that China is actually not, although, at the moment there is a reapproachment, but it's not actually believable because China may behave differently. And today, in the post-Cold War period, in the 21st century, what do we see? China is now the most formidable enemy to the United States of America's interest in the 21st century. In the 21st century. So now, this this is how the Cotillo's, the mandala theory actually explains and analyzes the state, the foreign policies or the foreign relations, and continues to have relevance. How the nation state are actually giving preference to the, or we can explain the foreign policies of the country with reference to the Cotillo's mandala theory or the six-fold principles, which they talk about establishing relationship with other states as far as the foreign milieu is actually concerned. But apart from that also, when we talk about the administrative, the principles and the rules or the regulations, as I said, that we, talk about, that is the principles of the division of labor, principles of hierarchy, principles of, that is the unity of commands, which are basically the main principles of the classical approach to administration in modern theoretical, the administrative and the management literature. So all these administrative principles were the guiding principles, in fact, during the Cotillo's, the Cotillo's administrative and management thought. So therefore, that you talk about. So what do we find that Cotillo's, in the Arthashastra also, that he was talking about that, he was talking about the principles of authority. He was talking about the unity of command. He was talking about the theory of motivations, that how you will motivate the workers or the employees working at various levels. And he was also talking about the principle of responsibility. He was, in fact, talking about the division of labor. He was talking about the principle of coordinations and the specialization, and most importantly, the importance of hierarchy in the field of administration. So therefore, Cotillo, in his administrative, thought, so therefore he talked about the unity of command, unity of, that is the principle of motivations, principle of responsibility, unity of division of labor, coordination, and specialization, hierarchy. So on the basis of these only, that we find that the Westerns or the European, the administrative or the classical administrative and the management theoretical, the literature have been developed. So therefore, what we can say today, Cotillo in the 350 BC, he talked about the administrative principles, how the administrations of a country should be, the structure on the basis of which we can say that the modern European or the modern European or the American administrative or the management literature have been developed to a greater extent. And apart from that also, Cotillo, although, he talked about a despotic, the rule, to be ruled by a despotic ruler, but that does not mean that we do not find any, the reference to the concept of the welfare state or the concept of the good governance in Cotillo's, the administrative and the management theoretical literature of the thought. So Cotillo, although he was talking about despotic rulers, despotic, the rules, but at the same time also in the Cotillo's, the thought that he did not, he in fact felt the importance of having some, the social, the ideas also. So, and when we will be talking about his social ideas, so definitely these social ideas are very much having connections with the modern welfare state system of governance. So what are these? He talked about tolerance. He talked about tolerance. He talked about respect for the others, even those who belong to different religious backgrounds. Even though, he talked about the caste segregations, he did not feel the importance of giving respects to the, the Sudras and the Vaishyas also. And also he talked about the importance of having love for the family, to have compassion, kindness towards the slaves and the prisoners of wars also. So these were definitely, the important aspects of the modern, that is the welfare state system of governance. And the most important thing was that, which are also inherent characteristics of the good governance today, that what he was talking about, that in order to have good governance, what is most important is that the administrations must be properly guided by an able ruler and by some able the administrators. They must be having trainings also. So therefore, he said that the rulers are very much, the responsibles, and they must be responsive to the people while running the governments, because he talked about the rulers, they should surrender what he or she likes or dislikes in the interest of his subjects. So definitely, when you talk about like surrendering the likes or the dislike in the interest of his subjects, in that sense, definitely he was talking about the concept of the modern days democratic system of governance. So therefore, although he was talking about a centralized system of administration, but at the same time, when he was talking about in the names of good governance, surrendering the kings or the rulers, the likes and the dislikes in the interest of his subjects, he was certainly talking about the promotions of his subjects. And at the same time, also, what we can say that his concept is also his concept of good governance is also very much related with the concept of new public administrations and new public service systems, when he's talking about to take care of the interests of not only the higher strata of the society, but also the downtrodden section of the society, that is the sudras and the boishas, and also having the compassion and kindness towards the slaves and the prisoners. So, as one of the important aspects of the new public administration is that that is the social equity. Social equity means there are people who are, the very weak, Say, for example, the slaves or the prisoners, or even the children, women. They are the weaker sections. So therefore, the administrator must think of the interests of these the marginalized or the downtrodden section of the society for the materializing concept of the social equity. So therefore, that when you talk about the Cotulus mandala theory, when you talk about his Saptanga theory, or the principles of the administrations, and the concept of the social ideas and the good governance, what do we find? We find the relevance of Cotillus in every aspect in modern days: administrative, theoretical, and administrative management, theoretical literature, and the concepts where lies the importance of Cotillo. So here comes the end of my lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We are enlightened by your insightful and in-depth analysis. We believe your deliberation on today's topic will encourage our participants to carry out intensive and extensive research work on it. I extend my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of Central Sanskrit University Equilibria campus and Holy Cross College, Agartala, to you, sir. We will get back to you again and again for such kinds of intellectual dialogue through some intellectual sessions. Again, thank you very much, sir, for being with us. I take this opportunity to offer my heartfelt gratitude to, on behalf of our campus and Holy Cross College, also to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Srinivas Varkedi, sir, under whose guidance Faculty Development Center of Central Sanskrit University Equilibria campus is committed to offer intellectual platform in the form of seminars, workshops, symposium, etc. Besides, I offer my heartfelt gratitude on behalf of our campus and committee members to our Director, Sir, Professor Prabhat Kumar Mahapatra, and Dr. Father Benny K. John, respected Principal of Holy Cross College. I offer my heartfelt gratitude to all faculty members, to all the faculty members of Central Sanskrit University Equilibria campus and Holy Cross College, Agartala, whose contribution is undeniable in organizing this event. Again, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful deliberation. And in this way, today we would like to conclude our session. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. onwards, we will have our third session. So I would like to request all our participants to join again. Thank you very much for being with us.
So thank you very much. But one thing I would like to say today is because the NAC process is actually going on in our university, so therefore I could not prepare the PPT presentation. But could I, made my presentation with the help of PPT? So I believe that the presentation would have been more meaningful. So I'm extremely sorry for that. But hope that uh, I will be able to reach you. I have been able to reach you out. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We will get back to you again, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. So can I leave now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, okay, okay.
I would like to request our participants to leave this session. Tomorrow we will meet again at 11 a.m. onwards. Thank you very much for being with us.